This may be one of the biggest Silicon Valley Bitcoin meetups that have ever been had. That's really awesome. I'm really glad you guys are here. I would typically give an opening remark. I don't want to. Tim Draper it has limited time, so I want to bring him up on stage. I don't think he needs any introduction. But go ahead. All right, someone who owns more Bitcoins than God, Tim Draper, and we have Preethi Kasireddy, who runs a company called TruStory, which is how we are live streaming this tonight.
Hello. Awesome. Thanks, George. Awesome. So I was told literally 10 minutes ago that I'm going to be firesiding chatting you, so I'm going to wing this in the best way possible. And I want to keep this conversational between me, Tim, and the audience. And I don't think Tim needs an introduction, obviously, but I've been always curious to hear. I'm sure you give your elevator pitch to people. So what's your 30-second elevator pitch that you give to people when you meet people?
Hi, I'm Tim Draper. I'm raising money for my venture fund. No. I'll tell you what, it's a new thing. It's sort of evolved over time. But I'm on a mission, and I was on a mission way back when, and that was to spread venture capital and entrepreneurship around the world. There is plenty of venture capital around the world now, and plenty of entrepreneurs. No, never enough entrepreneurs and never enough venture capital. But my new mission came to me when Bitcoin started, when I started to realize that there were all these interesting new uses of Bitcoin. And I thought, wow, this is, as we all know, open, transparent, global, easy to keep track of, and it can be used for all these different things. But what happened to me was this thing that happened was I saw that the world had been tribal and it was starting to go global. And all of a sudden I realized I have a new mission, and that is to drive all those geographic borders down, to encourage businesses around the world, and to fund all those companies that are going to do those neat things. And it started in the finance fintech area because I knew that was going to go through a big change. And now I'm kind of looking for things in where you use Bitcoin or blockchain or smart contracts or artificial intelligence in all these other fields. And you want me to just keep going, or you want?
Good. So just curious, when did you first hear about crypto? What was that?
Well, it's interesting because it was really like 2003 when I met this guy from Korea who said, I'm living half my life in the virtual world, and the other half I hire a guy to be my avatar in the virtual world. He was playing some game called Legends. No, I think it was like Lineage. Sorry, it's called Lineage, and so he hired a guy. So when he's at work, this guy, his job is to be this other guy's avatar. And I started to think, oh wow, people are going to live on this ethereal plane, and they're going to live in this real world. And the ethereal plane will get more and more interesting, and the real world will be the same. And so that meant virtual real estate and virtual insurance and virtual currency and virtual government and virtual all these other things. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I need to find that digital money company, that virtual money company. And I was really excited about some of the games that had virtual money in them, but I kept thinking, well, when are they going to translate to each other and make it so it's a real currency that we can all use instead of just being in one game? And then Bitcoin came along, and it caught some momentum, and I ended up backing this guy at CoinLab, And I said, I also want to buy some of this Bitcoin. So how do I do that? And he said, well, I'll go mine it for you, or I'll use your money to go buy a chip, an application-specific chip, to go mine it for you, and we can get it for below market. Market at that time was $6 a Bitcoin.
Wow.
And now, and he said, we can get it for $4 a Bitcoin if you give me this money to buy the chip. So he went and bought the chip, but the chip wasn't delivered on time. And we were kind of going, well, what's going on? What's going on? Turns out that the guys who made the chip had front run him and were producing their own Bitcoin with the chip. And meanwhile, Bitcoin prices went from 6 to 36. And then finally we got the chip. And then he started mining with a chip. And we got some Bitcoin, and he kept it at Mt. Gox. And then they disappeared the money from Mt. Gox, and we were kind of out of luck. And I thought, well, you know, it was a good experiment. It was really exciting, and maybe something else will come along. But with that news that the biggest exchange in the world for Bitcoin basically stole, maybe, or disappeared all of that money, I thought that's the end. You know, Bitcoin's going to go to zero. But it didn't. It dropped by, that news dropped the price of Bitcoin by only 15%. And I thought, ooh, people really like this stuff. They need it. Even if they're going to lose like 40% of the value of Bitcoin to some theft, they need it. And so then I went around looking for what they're using it for, and it was like everything from, you know, drug deals to sending money to your poor grandmother in Guatemala. And then I really got interested, and I started to buy more and more. And I kind of talked myself up into thinking that this was the future. And then when the Silk Road auction came up, I bid, and I knew all my friends were bidding below the market price because they were trying to get a deal. And I was thinking, well, you know, this is a lot of Bitcoin. And so I bid above the market price, and I thought, well, maybe I'll get one. There were 9 lots. I thought, well, maybe I'll get 1 or 2 of these lots and everything will be great. Well, I got them all. I got all. Be careful what you wish for. And so Bitcoin immediately went from where I got it at 632, I think up to 634, and then down to 180. And then, you know, of course, I did make that prediction that it would hit 10,000 in 3 years when it was at about 180, 200. And it did.
Yeah. And
Like
you
magic.
You mentioned that people wanted it. Like, what do you think, what makes this the right time for something like Bitcoin? Why do you think people want this so badly?
So there have been a lot of interesting, obvious uses. Sending money across border without paying Western Union 8 to 16%, and maybe quick transactions, or something that had great promise but really isn't going to be available until OpenNode and the Lightning Network speed everything up, are going to be the microtransactions. That's going to be a major, major change where people are going to go, why would I want dollars? There's no microtransaction in it all. So that's what I'm thinking might be one of the key things. But let's say you are one of the wealthy people from Syria or Sudan, and you've got a bunch of Sudanese money or Syrian money, and the military comes in and takes your home, and you are pushed out, and now you've got a bunch of Syrian money, and you're in Greece, and you're a refugee. Well, if you had put, 10% of your money into Bitcoin, you could have just started your life over right there. And you would have some money, and you could get going. But instead, you're stuck, you're a refugee, and you are stuck with fiat from a country that is going through a revolution. I think that kind of thing is a good example of of how we are now in a world that is completely exciting and global, and the tribalism is going to lose its clout. And I want to go a little further with this thought of the tribalism losing its clout. When the great lion in the jungle starts fading, there's this final roar before it dies in the jungle, okay? So, and it's a huge roar. Oh, you know, everyone hears it. So, so what's happening now is the tribes, the people who are in power over the tribes, are now looking and saying, wait, no, we can't lose our tribe. You know, they're fighting to cling to their power over their tribes. And so they're doing things like creating a trade war or a wall or a whatever, when they know really that we're all very global and we can all do business across borders very easily. And they feel like, no, we've got to stop the dike, you know, don't let any more water through, and let's control the people around us. And you're seeing the very high control politicians in power right now clinging to that old way of doing things. And we have a new world. And that new world is coming, and you guys all know it. And everybody knows that, hey, there's a better currency, and there's going to be better everything. You're going to have, let me go into one other thing before you hit me with a question. What is government? Government is your safety cushion. It's sort of the safe thing. We built these tribes to protect the people inside those borders. Well, so a lot of what government does now is insurance. It's healthcare insurance, and you're insured for your pension and your workman's compensation, all these insurance programs. Well, what is insurance? It's basically Bitcoin and a smart contract, and maybe some artificial intelligence to get out the fraud. That means that there are a whole bunch of bureaucrats that are going to cling to their job, try to cling to their job, while the more ambitious and forward-thinking governments are going to go, hey, I can compete across border. I'm Estonian. I only have 1.3 million people, but I can go market to 8 billion people an insurance program of some sort that's better than what they're getting, cheaper, more efficient, faster than anything they're getting from their own government.
But people fundamentally trust other humans. Do you think that will ever live in a world where we don't want to trust other humans? I think you're trying to move to a world where it's all digitized, all codified. I don't know, like, don't you think people always want to rely on some fundamental human being existing there, like the government?
Yeah, I think, as Reagan said, trust but verify. I trust you, but we're going to have to get to know each other a lot better before I hand over my Bitcoin or whatever. And so there is but who do I trust? Do I trust my government? Now you start looking, and it's the people who are older have if you do polling, the people who are older have very high trust in the US, in their government. People who are younger, very low trust in their government. They trust Bitcoin more than they trust a dollar. For people who are sort of 35 and younger, they're all saying, if I said, here, you can have $10,000 or 1 Bitcoin, most of them will say, I'll take the Bitcoin. If they're 50 or over, they'll all take the dollars. And that just shows where the world is headed. But it also shows that, old people, it's hard for us to change.
So you're saying who we trust is changing.
So who we trust. So who do you trust? Do you trust a fiat government that decides politically how many of the currency to print? or think, I mean, any of you guys from Argentina? Okay. You know what I'm talking about. Okay, there's a great guy from Argentina who started Ripio, and he came to me and he said, you know, that the government has basically, his family has built a fortune 3 times during his life, and the government's monetary policy has basically wiped him out 3 times. And he said, and I'm only 30 years old. So every 10 years, there is a currency wipeout in Argentina. And they've just announced, okay, I had a very interesting experience with the president of Argentina. I met with him about 3 years ago. And I said, you got to check into this Bitcoin stuff. You got a really bad currency, and you should really check into it and see what you can do. I came back about 6 months ago, and I said, remember about 2 years ago, we were talking about Bitcoin, and I said, so Bitcoin during that time has gone from 10,000. I was actually in Argentina when it was at 10,000 that day. It's gone from 10,000 down to 4,000. And he goes, uh-huh. And I said, during that time, the Argentinian peso has gone from 7.5 cents to 2.5 cents. And I said, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a bet. And the bet is that if the Argentinian peso does better than Bitcoin, then I will double my investment in Argentina. And he goes, uh-huh. And I said, but if Bitcoin does better, then you have to make Bitcoin a national currency.
Wow.
So, and then he looks at me like, what? And I said, the way Japan did. And he goes, get on the phone, ask those guys in Japan how that, anyway, he was a man of action for the moment. But now, you know what's happened, right? They've done just the opposite. They have outlawed the dollar. They haven't even, you know, Bitcoin, they're not even recognizing, but they have outlawed the dollar. But this is a country where in Buenos Aires, they've also outlawed Uber, and there are 80,000 Uber drivers in Buenos Aires. So they're not always paying attention to what gets outlawed.
Interesting. So I think everyone in the room probably is here because they believe the future is crypto. But I think we're going through this phase where there's a lull. Things are not really happening yet. A lot of things don't have product market fit. And so where do you think in this journey we are to reaching this like grand vision that you have?
If it works any way like the way the internet worked, we had the dot-com boom, and then Tony Perkins is here, and he predicted the bubble bursting. And then we had the bust. Well, we've had that in Bitcoin. Actually, we've had it like 12 times. But the big one was when it went from 20,000 down to 3,000.
Do you really think that was the big one? You don't think there'll be another one like that?
I think it'll rise higher and dampen less as we go. And so you won't, I don't think you'll see, what is that, 85% loss in that short a time?
I disagree, but okay.
Yeah. Well, good. You're braced for whatever possible thing happens. And I hope you all are, because this is going to be a rough ride. You know, if you don't think it's a rough ride yet, you'll see it's a rough ride, because all of those people in power, all those government, you know, whether they're in the bureaucracy or they're politicians or whatever, they like their power. They don't want to give it up. Fortunately, I've noticed in the U.S., they're saying things like, you know, I don't really like this Bitcoin, but I don't want to lose all the technology that we're going to gain from this. I think they do recognize that they want to let it rip, because where the internet affected communications and information and gaming and entertainment, all sorts of industries, the biggest industries in the world are being affected by Bitcoin and the blockchain smart contracts, and tie it to AI. And those are the ones that are trillions of dollars. That's finance, commerce, banking, insurance, and then healthcare. Actually, healthcare is remarkably, healthcare will be tied in with this as insurance becomes more the smart contract to Bitcoin, and the diagnosis in healthcare goes more from the doctor and trusting the doctor implicitly to big data and deep learning and artificial intelligence, where they're going to know not just here's your medical records and that's now online. It'll be here are your medical records, here's your genetic history, here's what your blood test results have been through the last year, and here's your Fitbit results, and this is the airplane seat you sat on your flight to Jamaica, and here's the, here's what you ate, and this is the flower you smelled, and all of that. And those things are going to be, those environmental things are going to be much more important long term than anything you could possibly tell your doctor in the 5 minutes they let you tell them.
Fair enough. Going back to the government point, obviously we're in a phase where the government is fighting crypto. They don't want it to happen because, like you said, it'll destroy their power.
Now, some of the big countries, like China, really doesn't want it.
Yes.
The U.S. is kind of on the fence. Russia wants it if they can take it themselves. And all the small countries in the world are saying, I can fight above my weight here. Yeah. And so you see, Malta, Gibraltar, Switzerland, Bermuda, Japan, all saying, hey, this is a big deal for us.
Yep.
Yeah.
But my question is, like, the government, like China, for example, I think they're thinking about issuing their own cryptocurrency. And so if China does that, or any large nation.
Okay, you being somebody younger than 35, do you trust the Chinese government or do you trust your crypto?
I trust the crypto, but
okay,
I'm talking about the mass.
So then, always think of yourself. Don't always think of the masses, because
Okay.
you can't put your brain into theirs.
Yep.
Okay. So the Chinese government is now got their own crypto. Who's going to trust that?
The Chinese?
Chinese, maybe the premier, maybe the president. But I mean, if I'm Chinese, I'm kind of going, yeah, I don't even really trust my renminbi,
So you think it's a generational thing where the current generation of Chinese might trust the Chinese currency, but my generation and below is going to want to trust something like Bitcoin.
Yeah, wouldn't you much rather have Bitcoin than some, trumped up currency that some government official has decided
I would,
is
but
fine?
I guess I'm looking out for, you're right, I'm looking out for the kind of the mass appeal, and my mom, my dad, grandma, they're not going to trust some random developer who shipped Bitcoin, but they're going to trust the government. But I can see your point of view that it's
it was way back when I remember my dad always saying, the government is us. We are the government, at least in the U.S. That was a big part of the U.S. And then he took me to a government office, and the guy behind the counter said, what can we do for you? How can we make your business happier? How can we improve your life at home? How can we improve your children's education? Those were the words out of his mouth. Has any of you heard that from any government official over the last 15 years? No, it's more, have you filled out my form? Have you filled out 15B and you didn't do it right? I know, because you didn't do it right. And so it's become a little bit of an us against them, and it's gotta be, we all need to start to bring it back. And I think the way we bring it back is to create this decentralized world so that they know they have to compete with all those other governments. And then they'll be just like, the various businesses who have to compete with other businesses to provide the service for customers. They will start looking at their constituents as customers rather than as their subjects. Yeah, good word.
Absolutely. I think what crypto does, it shifts power back towards the people. And I think that's the powerful part about crypto. It's like all of us are now saying like, fuck you, government. Like, we have our own tools, our own technologies to figure this out. Like, we don't need you, and that's powerful. My next question for you is like, outside of Bitcoin, what are you thinking about or looking at from an investment point of view, or just like intellectually curious in crypto?
So I've sort of told you I'm looking for this new decentralized world. I will try to drive that with my investment decisions. So if it's a big enough idea, if it's a big enough market, unique enough technology, a driven entrepreneur, and it looks like they might be able to change the way we all think about something and move it in that decentralized direction, those are the kinds of things I'm going to be looking to invest in. And that can be in any of those major fields that I mentioned. And I am looking for GovTech. We've had a few, but we haven't had a ton. We backed Unstoppable. Has anybody looked at Unstoppable? Okay. Unstoppable is free speech for all, everyone in the world. So go ahead, you can get the thing. Yeah, you can get your domain and nobody can stop whatever it is, whatever the message is that you want to spread, no one can stop that. And that is a really powerful thing. And they can't stop it. That's why they call themselves Unstoppable. And I thought that was kind of interesting. So spreading free speech around the world, that's a pretty big mission. And I like it. And then I'm looking for those opportunities where in healthcare, where you can actually get free virtual healthcare, at least the diagnostics part of it. I think that's kind of a really cool thing. And then I'm kind of hoping that we see more in Bitcoin. I'm hoping we see more things that are attaching accounting to the blockchain so that all that accounting is done. Long term, what I really wanted to do, I tried to do this and then I realized I had to pay double accounting and double legal to do it. I wanted to take investors all in Bitcoin, invest the money all in Bitcoin, and have the entrepreneurs pay their employees and suppliers all in Bitcoin. And naturally, we all think, oh, that's perfect because all the accounting's already done. You don't need the accountant, you don't need the lawyer, you build, and I could build in with my limited partners a smart contract so that if a company was sold, all the money would immediately just go into all of their wallets through a natural waterfall. Well, turns out the accountants make you change the Bitcoin to dollars, pay the capital gain, change it back to Bitcoin, and then the lawyers get involved and they're all excited because they're saying, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. All of these terms that we have, we can double the number of terms because we've got because now we got another currency that we're dealing with. So it comes out in dollars and it comes out in Bitcoin. They're two different things.
Yeah.
So what I'm hoping is that we move toward that. So I'm looking for engineers who are moving toward that, where we can, because at that point it will be very difficult for the government to have an argument that says you have to go through a big 5 accounting firm and you have to do this legally and this, because it'll all be a deal on a smart contract and we'll all be kind of better off. Yep. And I think here's how you get the government on your side. You build in a little tax. And the way you build in that tax is on transaction. Every transaction, you build in a little tax. There was this guy who ran for president. His name's Scott Smith. I don't think he got any votes. But he wrote this great book. And the book was all about the fact that if you had a transaction tax, it could be 0.5%, and it would pay for twice what the government gets now. And you'd have that much more liquidity in the marketplace. So, and you wouldn't have to have any of those other taxes. And it would be automatic. And now he realizes that Bitcoin is his savior to get people to try this. And now he's running that up the flagpole in Washington. Let's all give them some positive vibes.
Super cool. I have one last question. It's going to be a yes or no question. Obviously, Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency, and a lot of people believe that there's nothing that can compete with Bitcoin. Do you believe that Bitcoin is here to stay, or do you think there's potentially another cryptocurrency that can become the next fiat?
Oh, I think there already are a bunch of other currencies out there. I mean,
The dominant one. Can anything beat Bitcoin?
Well, what's interesting is in the internet, when it would have been like saying, can anything beat AOL? Yes is the answer. And if the Bitcoin engineers aren't working super hard, they won't keep their dominance. But we have gone through the big boom and the bust, and Bitcoin is the real strong survivor. And so it does look very strong. It looks really good for Bitcoin to be one of the major players. That doesn't mean that you're not going to see something, Ethereum or Tezos or EOS or something become something really important. Or maybe even, maybe Facebook's thing starts to work. I don't know. But I think we've got, the game is afoot. I think the competition is on, and we all know that this is just a better way to do business.
Yep.
And it's frictionless, and it'll make the world a much richer place, because a frictionless society creates a better economy. And so, going from shells to gold was a major breakthrough. Going from gold to the promise of gold, major breakthrough. Getting credit cards, another major breakthrough. This is another major breakthrough. So, cool. I'm glad
Tim.
there are all these Bitcoin hodlers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, for letting us be in your castle.